Got 3 items on the agenda. Seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Amundson, would you do us the pleasure and lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have reached audience participation. This is your opportunity to speak to the Joint Assembly Planning Commission on any topic. If you have going to call in telephonic and would like to speak, please hit *3. You will hear your hand has been raised. Everyone wishing to speak on the audience participation has 3 minutes. So anybody here tonight want to speak? That's not going to speak on some other thing? Any telephonics? One telephonic. So let's take our telephonic caller, please.
This is Commissioner Glasson. I'm here and can hear, but I apparently am muted the whole time.
Okay, Commissioner Glassman, I have marked you as present.
Okay. So anybody else telephonic for audience participation? Anybody in the audience wish to speak? Otherwise, we're going to close out audience participation at this time, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Strawn. Okay. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, members of the Planning Commission. Alex Strawn, Planning Director for the Borough. We have a fairly light agenda for you tonight. By popular request, by popular demand, we have a fairly short meeting tonight, but some pretty important topics that we're going to be talking about. The first one is Mr. Amundson with the state of Alaska is going to give a presentation on some of the state projects that are happening here in the borough. We certainly get a lot of questions about this at the planning department, so I'm happy to get updated information. And then we're going to have MEA talk about a new intertie or electrical transmission line that will go through the northern part of the core area from FISHHOOK to PITTMAN. And I'm fortunate enough to be part of a board that will help sort of determine where that line is going to go. And I'm going to be looking at how this is going to affect borough property and our platting process, rights of ways, and things like that. So happy to be part of that. And then we have our new development services manager. This is the position I was in for 8 years. Jay Majors is going to give a presentation on, so up to this point, we've got all of our code enforcement and permitting onto a mobile platform, and now we have fresh eyes to look at how all that's going to work and how we're going to utilize that to allocate our resources as efficiently as possible. So with that, I'll have Mr. Amundson give his presentation.
Mr. Mayor, Planning Commission members, and Assembly members, for those of you that have not met me yet, my name is Jim Amundson. I'm the Chief of Highway Design for Central Region US DOT, and it's my fault. My responsibility is for making sure that the roads and services that are out here are up to the standards and kept in fully functional position, and it's my responsibility to get that done. So when you're wondering who's to blame or whose fault it is, give me a call. Be happy to discuss the issues and do everything we can to move forward to get them taken care of. But just like every one of us, we all are on a budget. I never have enough money to do everything that we'd like to do with it. So again, that, what keeps us from doing 100% of everything perfect out here, it's always about the budget. We don't have enough of it, and we never do. So finding out how to be as efficient and effective with the budget we have and making sure that we're delivering it to the most effective way to meet the needs of you, the public out here, are exactly why I like coming out here and getting some feedback from everybody up here on a regular basis. We do public meetings and other stuff. That's another way we get feedback on our projects and what's going on. But at any time, I'd be always happy to come back up and answer questions about anything that you see going on with our DOT up here. They don't all work for me, but I certainly know where their bosses sit, and I can go talk to them in the morning. So that's, to a huge extent, that's who I am, and that's why I'm up here. What I brought today was And it's the question that we always hear, what's happening this summer? Grab it, make sure you grab a copy of it. I sent it out as an email to the, as well. And I can also send you additional emails of it as we go forward so that you can share it with your constituents so that they know what's coming this summer. And it's going to be, if you notice, lots of dots. There's a lot of stuff coming this summer. We're going to be working on the Parks Highway out there at Pittman to Big Lake where it's already under construction. We're also going to be resurfacing the Parks Highway right through the middle of downtown Wasilla. All those lovely ruts. Yes, trust me, I'm very familiar with them. For if you don't know, my parents live off of Connect Goose Bay Road, and trust me, I get regular reports on where's the latest chuck hole showed up and when did Dad hit it last and why haven't I fixed it yet? So I have a very vested interest in taking care of the roads up here. So you'll find a very sympathetic ear whenever there's an issue. I am very interested in taking care of the roads up here.
Who has that resurfacing contract for the,
Not been awarded yet. We'll be advertising it about the end of the month.
okay.
So we'll be advertising at the end of March, April award, or end of April, early May award. But the asphalt plants don't kick into gear until about the middle of May, and until the road weight restrictions are off the roads. They're not going to be running full loads anyway for trying to get paving done. So they're not going to get kicked into gear until probably the first or second week of June. But some of the other projects, and there's a long list of them, I'm not going to stand here and tell you about them one by one because frankly, your eyes will all roll up. I'd much rather you guys take a look at it and then ask me any specific questions you have about projects that are on it. And just as important, there's a couple of them that aren't on it yet. Bogart Engstrom comes to mind. And yes, I absolutely know that that is a very needed project, but that one's a project that is just like everything else that we do with federal money. There's a process that we have to get through, and we're working through that process as fast as we can. But in the meantime, I absolutely understand how bad a mess that is. I used to drive through it twice a day going back and forth to Anchorage. So I know how bad that corner is. And yes, we are doing everything we can to get it taken care of. But that's one that's not going to be happening this summer. Right now, there's an outside chance we might get it next summer, but the likelihood, smart money says it's going to be summer of 23 before we get it under construction. And that's about 3 years longer than I wanted to take. So, but with that, I would like to throw it open to the floor for anybody on the, with a question that has.
Mr. Hale, go ahead.
So, just on the east side of the George Palmer Bridge, headed out into Butte from Palmer, there's a really bad stretch that when it rains, it gets really bad potholey. Is there any plans to do anything with that? I don't see it on the list.
There will be some maintenance work going on out there this summer. I have a larger project that's currently just getting started in design. Frankly, it was supposed to have started this time last year, but it didn't get into the initial STIP update. So we had to fight our way, and we're finally getting it added as part of STIP Amendment 2. So that we're finally getting the design work started, where we're, instead of just going out there and milling and putting another overlay on, just like we've done the last 3 or 4 times, we're looking at a more extensive project that will allow us to do more extensive dig outs in a couple areas just like that one, where we need to not only just deal with the surface, but we need to get under the surface and deal with some of the base and the sub base underneath it. That project's coming, but it's probably 4 years out before we're going to get to turn dirt on it.
Yeah, I saw you
But
guys.
we've got maintenance coming this summer, but I agree that it needs to be taken
I saw
care of.
you all had done a.
I get tired of hitting that bump too.
You guys
And you got
got
to remember, my chief of maintenance drives out here and back every day. So he hits the bump every day and probably grits his teeth and works with his maintenance guys to stay on top of it. But absolutely recognize we need to do more than the Band-Aid that we're currently putting on it.
How about the Parks Highway Bridge replacements, Montana Creek, Sheep Creek, Goose Creek? Those are all 3 scheduled for this summer, replacements?
We're expecting to get them advertised probably about June. So the construction work will probably be kicking in August, but most of that work will probably be finished or finishing up next summer, but it's scheduled to start before the end of this summer.
Are they going to have like the bike path
Detour bypass around it, yes.
on both of them? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Ms. Nowers?
Thank you. Through the mayor, Mr. Amundson, always great to have you here. I like how the buck stops with you. I'd like you to come to my house because my children always think it's my fault. I'd like to just say, no, it's Mr. Amundsen's fault. I've mentioned it before, but you'll probably continue to hear from me about it. But the lighting issue on the phase 2 of the Glen Highway, just south of town here, that super dark stretch by Echo Lake, which has been the scene of some horrific fatalities over the years. And the state's short on dollars to light it. And I want to see that get fixed. It's an interstate highway. And anyways.
I hear the concern. I'd love to be able to go and make that a continuously lit corridor. But Connect Goose Bay Road is a highway safety corridor in my area. And I can't afford to continuously light it either.
Yeah.
With this new project coming up. Yeah. The limitations on the budget are not pleasant.
Yeah.
That's
No.
one of the consequences.
I appreciate that. It's 45,000 a year to light that stretch. So that's kind of one bad accident right there. So, and then I was just curious on the Glen Highway earthquake repairs, mile 40 to 68. Looks like you already got money for the interchange. I know there were some issues there, but is that primarily damage that's north of Palmer as opposed to south of Palmer? I was thinking like Moose
Yes,
Creek.
ma'am, for most of it.
Okay.
There's lots of little cracking off on the shoulders, stabilization of the sides of our embankment and stuff like that as well. A lot of the immediate stuff where you're not hitting the bump of the road, those have already been taken care of. This is going in and dealing with the more long-term maintenance and repair type stuff, dealing with the bigger cracks or cracks that we've got a temporary patch in them. But if you remember that those repairs were being made in December, and a lot of the pavement that we put down on it is not going to last forever. It's lower quality because it was too cold when we put it down. So we're going out and in a couple places we're milling up the pavement that's there to put down a pavement surface that's going to last.
Thank you.
Hale, did you have something?
Yeah, I just had, number 26 here on your list, Clark Wolverine, November 18 earthquake. Is that the stretch right there at Wolverine Creek?
Yeah, coming up out of the low ground and then heading up towards.
And you guys
Yes.
are gonna be working on that this summer?
They'll be working on that this summer.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I believe that one's supposed to advertise this week or next week.
Commissioners, we've got this guy trapped, so
They know they can get me back out here anytime, Mayor.
hit him with
I'll
questions.
come. I don't hide.
Okay, Mr. Ortiz?
Through the mayor. The only question I guess I have would be, do you have to do with the traffic lighting as well? So the new Springer lights, I know the timing of the light, they're horrific. I live back behind the fairgrounds and the Springer system, and I mean, it's a constant in my neighborhood. The chatter is going on like, man, we're waiting like 3-4 minutes and there's no traffic and we're just waiting to turn. So I don't know what's up with the timing of the lights at those different Springer lights.
I have a staff member that spends all of his spare time trying to find a better way to work the timing so that it's more efficient. The challenge is the priority of getting the traffic moved is always going to be north-south. So if there's a delay, if someone's stuck waiting an extra 30 seconds to a minute, it's usually going to be that side road. And
Couldn't they just mimic the lights at one of the other intersections? Because those seem to work well.
well, actually, part of what we do with that whole corridor is we try and time the lights so that when you catch a green light going south or catch a green light going north, once you catch the first green one, as long as you do the speed limit, you'll continue to hit the green lights going north or going south. So when the car rolls up and hits the sensor that says, hey, we got a car waiting, it then gets in the queue to say, okay, the next gap when it's supposed to be an opportunity for the red light to happen, that's when you get the red light to let the side traffic coming out. But the sequencing of that and trying to keep that so that you continue to have that ongoing synchronicity between the lights going north and south. So you're getting the green lights when you do the speed limit. is why you sometimes have that cycle of an extra 30 seconds or minute beyond what normally you'd expect when you're sitting there waiting for that light to change. And he continues to fiddle with it and try and come up with better sequencing to better handle it. But the reality is some of those slower times of the day, I've sat there and it feels like forever when you're waiting for the light to change. So we'll continue to try and do better, but that's the challenge, is when you're trying to keep that traffic flow north-south and synchronize the lights for the north-south through traffic. It's sometimes where you get that side street where you're ending up sitting there for an extra couple minutes longer than you really wanted to. And recognize that's a cost. So
Thank you.
Well, the borough wants to thank you for Seward Meridian Phase 2 going to Selden Road. That's, has that been bid out yet? Do you have a company who's doing that one?
we don't have a contract awarded yet, but it's scheduled to advertise at the end of
Yeah.
April, first week of May.
Oh, we want to thank you for that one.
That's what we're currently on track for.
great progress. Now let's talk about the mayor's road.
By all means.
Just kidding. Okay. Anything else, commissioners or assembly members for Mr. Amundson? Once again, just a great report, and thanks for working so hard in the borough. We appreciate
As
it.
always, thanks for having me. And again, the feedback and the questions, we really do listen to what you bring up. We really do look at trying to come up with better ways to do our signal timing and better ways to get and deliver the services up here. And your feedback helps us with that. So I appreciate you
And
putting
your
up with
telephone
me.
number was what?
907-269-0566.
0566?
0566. And the email address is jim.amundsen@alaska.gov. That's AMUNDSEN. That's Amundsen, Jim Amundsen. Email me anytime. Always happy to get the questions.
Okay,
Because like I said, I can't fix it if I don't know what's broke. So
thank you. Appreciate it, sir. Let's see, Mr. Strawn, are you taking over the next one? Palmer FISHHOOK Transmission Road, who's?
Thank you, Mayor, Planning Commissioners, and Assembly members. My name is Ed Jenkin. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for MEA. First of all, I'd like to express our appreciation of having the invite to come here and present this project before you. I'd like to really thank Alex Strawn for his involvement in the project and reaching out for us and his responsiveness to moving this project forward in a manner that serves the Matsu Borough. I'm not going to do the speaking because engineers tend to not do the best job of that. So, but we do have two engineers here. One is the project manager. One is the head of engineering to help with any technical questions you may have concerning the project. But you'll be listening to Jennifer Castro, who manages our public outreach on this project. And so I'm going to turn that over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. Welcome too.
May I pull this down? Is that okay? Okay, thank you.
Jim, just point that towards my direction. That's where the wireless dongle's at.
Got the power, yeah.
Forward and backward.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Jennifer Castro with Matanuska Electric Association. I help with our public outreach and coordination. And we appreciate the opportunity to come present a study to you that we're doing over the course of the next few months. So in the nutshell version, basically what our study is looking at is some specific infrastructure projects that would connect from FISHHOOK to PITTMAN and include a transmission line that would run from those areas, through those areas, as well as the possibility of siting 2 residential substations to support the power load and future power load in these areas. So I'll talk a little bit in more detail about those specific sites and routes that we're looking at in this study. Ew, that doesn't look very good. I don't know.
Well, I told them that we wanted the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
We weren't able to get it before the meeting.
I apologize. If you could kind of help me maneuver a little bit, maybe.
We're trying to make it work the best we can.
Yes, thank you. So this one, but if you can kind of roll it up just a little bit, that'd be great. So just to give you a little bit of background about MEA, we are a not-for-profit, member-owned and led electric cooperative. We are celebrating our 80-year anniversary this year, and we serve currently about 53,500 members. And we primarily produce our power with natural gas at our Eklutna generation station, which is located out in Eklutna. And we're local. Most of our employees are also members. And so building and driving our communities is very important to us, not just as members, but employees as well. Our service area is huge, just like the borough, but we serve residents stretching all the way from Eagle River up towards Denali State Park and then over all the way up to Glacier View. So a pretty massive service territory that we're responsible for providing power to. We currently have 23 substations on our Eklutna generation station, and we manage over 4,500 miles of power lines, a pretty 50-50 mix of overhead and underground lines, as well as about 122 miles of transmission lines. So we do a scientific survey with our membership every single year, and we ask them, what is the most important thing to you when it comes to your power? And the number one answer, the number one response that we get from our membership is reliability. It's more important to our members than cost and all the other factors associated with providing power. It's reliability. Our members count on us to make sure that they have reliable power as much and often as possible. So part of something that we've been experiencing, and I'm sure the borough is very well aware of this, is the population growth that we're experiencing out here. And over the past few years, we're seeing the addition of about 1,100 new electrical services being added each year. So that's certainly something that we're paying attention to make sure that we have the right kind of system in place to support that growth, and as well as the projected growth going into the future. So part of that system analysis is also looking at what redundancy capabilities we have built into our system. If something happens, if there's a natural disaster, what kinds of things do we have in place so that if power goes out or something happens to power over here, can we do something over here to help support or bring those customers back on? So there's a lot of balance, give and take, and planning that goes into making sure that we're providing that reliability for our members. So in planning for our future and our future power load and all of those things, one of the things that we looked at, and as I mentioned earlier, adding 1,100 or so new services each year, is where are we seeing a lot of this growth happening in terms of where we're having to put in new services and provide more power to. So we did a heat map looking at the hot spots of where these new services have been added over the past 5 years. And so if you look at this map, you can see in a lot of the red areas where we're seeing the most growth for new power services is primarily outside of that Wasilla-Palmer core area, and especially to the north of that. So when we were looking further into that specific area, what we identified was this project study area that's in need of some power improvement projects. And I'll kind of show a little bit more why that is. So this map is just a more blown up version of what we were just looking at. And so you can kind of see the different areas or region inside that green area. And so what's on the outside of that area is some different points of the existing infrastructure that we have in place for power. So those yellow lines that you see, that's our existing transmission system, as well as our dots, which show our substations that are currently in place. And so what you don't see inside of that study area is the same thing. You're not seeing residential substations and you're not seeing transmission lines. And so what we've identified here is a need for connection of a transmission line, as well as the addition of 2 residential substations needed to support the existing power load that's here, as well as the projected load growth for the future population that's projected to happen out here in the borough. So what we're looking at in this area is about approximately 20 miles or so of transmission line that would run from that east side and connect all the way down to that McRae substation. And so there's about 4 community council areas or regions within this area that would be impacted by this project. And so when we're talking about transmission line structures, there's a lot of different kinds of lines and they all look different and what's what, right? And so we wanted to show you or give you an idea of what, for this project, the transmission lines would look like. So on the far left, that's a single circuit 115 kilovolt transmission line. In the middle is a double circuit version of that. And then on the far right is a picture of what a typical substation looks like. So the poles, the wood pole structures that we're talking about here, like I said, we have some that exist already, mostly along the Palmer-Wasilla Highway. If you ever are driving by and you look off, you might see an example of this. So that's just to give you guys an idea of what we're talking about here. So there is criteria that we have to use, of course, when we're thinking about putting in a transmission line. And the first thing is what existing compatible rights of way do we have available to us for this? And then, of course, looking at what other options, is there something that runs parallel that we could possibly work with? And then, of course, we want to make sure that we're minimizing any effects on property owners. We're not in the real estate business. That's not what we do. We just want to make sure that we have the right kind of power infrastructure in place for our members to receive reliable power. The project has to be technically feasible, so what we're capable of creating and doing, of course. And then making sure that whatever infrastructure we put in, that it can all work together with our existing infrastructure, as well as tie in with the transmission line and the 2 residential substations that we're looking at. And then, of course, the important factor is being a not-for-profit cooperative and member-owned is cost. We have to make sure that this is something that's feasible to our membership, and also, of course, look at the impacts to rates and what that could look like as well. So being very mindful of all of this different criteria as we consider a transmission line route. So this is that same map, but just kind of showing a very general circle area of where 2 residential substations could possibly go. And the thing about substations, the way to think about them is they're like the grocery store of power for our members. And so when you want to feed a certain group, you have to make sure that the grocery store is located as close to them as much as possible. So if I want to feed residents in FISHHOOK, I can't put their grocery store up in Willow, right? That's not going to work. So we have to make sure that with the placement of these residential substations, that we can get them close to the power load need as much as possible. Some additional siting criteria that we have to consider when it comes to substations is that we're looking for a minimum of 4 acres, and that the sites are located to where the power load exists. We're really looking for, any undeveloped land that's available, and so starting that process, working with other agencies and seeing what's out there, whether it's vacant, industrial, or commercial. And then we want to make sure that our substations are situated as close as possible to road access. For the most part, we are accessing our substations year-round for maintenance issues, other things that come up. So we have to make sure that we can get to it, of course, and then that it avoids the 100-year floodplain. So as I mentioned, this is a study. We are in the study process. Nothing is set in stone at this point. And so we are in the very beginning phase of our outreach with all different types of community members and agencies and organizations. And what we're really looking for is for our members to help us create this project, and really get the feedback and input as much as possible so that we are putting in the best line, the best substations in the right locations that really meet, hopefully, the needs and as much as possible the desires of our membership as we support their need for reliable power. In terms of a timeline for when this actual project could happen, we're talking like several years down the road. So like I mentioned, very early study phase in this project, and just looking at potential route options as well as site options. So we've already been proactive in reaching out to all sorts of different community members and agencies. We've already met with the 4 community councils that are in this area, and they were gracious enough to give us a volunteer community council liaison to serve as part of our working group that we've established. And so we just held our first working group meeting that has about, I think, 16 folks on that working group. From all sorts of different backgrounds and community interests as well, to help us put together some route options and ideas. And then we are planning on hosting a public open house in May and September. Not sure yet if that's going to be virtual or in person, as we're kind of paving a new way here with the COVID virus. And so, but we will put a bunch of public invite and information out about those. And then we're also doing kind of more one-on-one or direct briefings with agencies and other organizations as well. And then we do have a project page specific to this study. It's on our website. So if you just go to our website under major projects, you'll see this there as well with all the charts and graphs and information. And we'll be adding more information as that comes along. So that's all I have to present for you guys today. Do we have any questions that I or any of our engineers might be able to answer for you guys?
Mr. Sumner, then Ms. Nowers.
Yeah, could you explain what is the actual function of the substations? What do they actually do?
Listen up. So primarily what happens is the power is produced at our Clutna generation station. It's fed through bigger transmission, and then it's taken to a substation where the substation takes the power and pares it down to a distribution level so that it can be provided or distributed at your home. That's kind of the nutshell version of it. But would you like a more technical answer to that question? Because we can give it to you.
Okay, let's do the technical one.
Yes, so most of our transmission lines come in at a high voltage, and so we need to drop down the voltage in order to distribute it. It's cheaper to run distribution lines to people's homes rather than trying to run transmission lines to people's homes. So we drop it down from 115,000 volts down to 12,470. And yeah. Will Klatt.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I guess in addition to that, we also have protective breakers and things that open up in the event of faults. And so substations handle all of the logic behind that and knowing when to open and how to control whether a line is energized or not.
So would the new substations be fed directly from Clutna, or I suppose it'd branch off somewhere then? So you'd have high voltage lines?
Yeah, so we're looking to connect into the transmission line that runs out towards Sutton. And it would connect all the way over towards PITTMAN Road. So we'd be running a 20-mile transmission line across the north side of Palmer and Wasilla and kind of tapping off 2 substations off of it. And those would connect into existing distribution lines. So some of the customers from existing substations would be transferred to the new ones. And that way you have more reliable power because there's less people affected by an outage that opens up a breaker.
I seem to remember the city of Wasilla was going to require that those be buried through Wasilla as they go through is that route avoiding Wasilla entirely?
Yeah, MEA chose not to install an underground transmission line due to the additional cost. We're looking at 6 to 10 times the cost of an overhead transmission lines due to all the concrete raceways and also the cable itself. And so we're looking at doing an overhead line. It wouldn't necessarily have to avoid Wasilla. It's it's a different project. It's but trying to, I guess, meet the needs of the community throughout.
Ms. Nowers?
Thank you. It's kind of like a general question, the growth is the big issue for us in the Mat-Su, just overall, and that affects MEA as well, and having to put in substations lines that comes with a cost. I know houses are getting more energy efficient with appliances, so that's driving down your load. But you're also looking ahead to electric vehicles and potentially that increasing your load. I know utilities in the lower 48 do incentive programs for energy efficient houses to reduce the load on their system. Think of one example in Seattle where the community, nobody wants a substation next to you, and they were able to reduce their load enough that there wasn't a need for a substation. And I'm not suggesting that's the case at all here, because you've got a reliability issue too. But is MEA sort of, I'm wondering, just kind of two broad questions, and put you on the spot here, like in terms of your load growth, what you're kind of seeing. And then are you looking at, kind of out of the box, how we can manage that growth so we don't have to put in new substation transmission lines, maybe as often? Can we mitigate it with incentivizing efficiency, other measures that might help reduce the power use so you don't have as much need, even though we're growing out here?
I know we're certainly looking at what kind of different options there are in terms of efficiencies and consumer use and whatnot. I think the one thing, though, that we really have to consider as well is the fact that a lot of our existing infrastructure and substations are already pretty old, and a lot of them are getting up to their life expectancy. And so even with building new infrastructure and trying to distribute loads better, we still have to plan, contingencies for that other aging infrastructure. And so specific to this project, I couldn't tell you for sure exactly how that would pan out. But I know that when we do our analysis and looking at the load distribution, that's certainly a part of the consideration and the discussion is, if this load is moved over here, what kind of impact would that have on the other area infrastructure, as well as how would that change its life expectancy of its existing technologies and whatnot and capabilities. And so when would we have to then upgrade or replace that equipment? And it's kind of a big process. And so I don't really have a clear answer for you on that now, but I could certainly get back to you with a better answer and good information on that. But it is something that we're always looking at in terms of how to distribute load and if there's ways to create more efficiencies. I think the hard part is just the environment that we live in, and our two biggest users of energy are heat and light. And we don't have those very much, for a good portion of the year where we're having to provide that and create that and produce that. And so there's always kind of that consideration as well as to what fits our local needs here as well, compared to what else is being done in the lower 48 and whatnot, where they get really great weather and all those other things.
No, thank you. It's always what I know about the electric grid. It's always a miracle when I flip that switch and the power actually comes on, all the balancing and everything you're doing. If people want to have some input, is this going to come before the MEA board, or is there other ways to get input on this? And I don't know if you had a cost estimate. That would be my other question.
I don't know if we're at cost estimate phase yet. But the input, so we created an email where people could specifically provide feedback for that and for this project and study. And then the other thing that they can do is if they go to the project page, there's actually a fillable form there as well. So if they're on their mobile or tablet, they can actually directly go on there and provide their feedback and information that way. Or they're always welcome to give us a call or email or anything like that and share any thoughts or ideas that they have. And then cost question, I don't know if you have.
I mean, typically transmission is around a million a mile is what we use as a general ballpark estimate. So 20 miles would be 20 million.
For the larger lines, okay.
Yeah, for transmission.
Would that include your substations, or would that be on top of?
No, so the substations just using one that we previously built. Those we're looking at probably around 6 million apiece.
How many customers or households are you powering? You said the population was going up 10,000.
So currently our membership is about 53,500 members, and then we're over 70,000 meters. And then what we've been seeing with the population growth out here in the Mat-Su specifically is about 1,100 new residential services a year.
So the growth for MEA is going south and west?
It's on that map where we're seeing them. I mean, there's growth kind of everywhere, but really the hot zones are where we're seeing the most growth happen in terms of new services is right outside that Palmer-Wasilla core and north of that
On the
area.
outside?
Yeah.
Okay. More questions for MEA? Mr. Sumner?
So maybe like $500 per meter is what this is going to cost. How long over how long of a period do you guys amortize out those costs, and what kind of rate?
So in our budget, we build in a certain amount of capital projects yearly. And then I think how we would phase this project on a yearly basis so that it's not all one giant cost at once. And so this would be over a period of time to help spread those costs out more so that it wouldn't have such a hard hit impact to our rates. And so that's of course something that we always have to look at and consider when it comes to building projects or doing infrastructure upgrades to our system. So I think that will all come at a later time. And right now we're just still in this study phase to just even see what the route and site options are. And then going from that point to say, okay, now what are the technical needs? What are all the costs, these, and going up and up from there. So.
Anything else? More questions? Well, thank you very much, MEA. It's just been a great presentation. We appreciate your time coming.
Thank
coming
you.
over here.
Appreciate your time.
Mr. Strawn? Okay. You don't want to introduce? Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Assembly. The mic's not on, Jay. There you go. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Assembly, Planning Commission. My name is Jay Majors. I'm the new Development Service Manager, as Alex has told you earlier. I'll be presenting you with a review of the development services past year and our path going into 2021. So 2020 saw development services department division transform from a paper-intensive permitting operation into a more digital realm. We took volumes and volumes of data and old data and put them into the digital form so we can search for this. We can retrieve it a lot easier for public request. And it's just moved our mindset into from data into a knowledge mindset. Am I driving this? Thank you. So this brief is based on that data and how we're going to use it moving forward. So development services is the outward-facing division in the planning department. My team administers, develops, administers, and enforces borough code. We're a team of 13 covering everything from permitting to code enforcement. I know that's a hot topic. The graph on the right depicts our current code violations in our database. As you can see, the 8.50 trash and junk violations outpace all other violations by far. We've created a newly revised code violation matrix that's going to assist our dispatchers in prioritizing the complaints, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. So we took a hard look at the makeup of the code violations in the database, and because we have them in the database now, it's searchable and retrievable. It makes our job a lot easier identifying the trends. So we were able to group these into categories. So we looked at the code and code definitions, and we saw a common reoccurring themes. So we saw public safety was a theme. We saw public nuisances as a theme. We saw permitting violations, and then we saw a lot of the strap hangers that weren't as many. Our predominant code violation 8850 trash and junk, clearly defined in the code as a public nuisance. So we're committed to our initial response times on the third, fourth column over. I think those are reasonable to get to the areas of complaints. And a couple more slides here, you'll see kind of our database of complaints, and it'll make a lot more sense. The percentages on the right, on the far right column, our far right margin, depict how the database looks if we applied this new category system. So about less than 10% of them are in category 1. Our predominant area obviously is the 65% in the public nuisance area, which includes that 8.50 trash and junk. So we're looking at new ways to do methods to solve this problem. So we have about 312 active cases of trash and junk, and I'm on slide 4. These 312 cases represent the residents' complaints, present clearly a nuisance problem, and it's not isolated in any one area, as you can see from the red dots on the screen. It's all over the borough. It doesn't matter what area, new, old, it's borough-wide. So we believe the solution resides in a combined approach, such as a borough-wide cleanup, community council cleanups, and code enforcement with more often revisit rates of our code compliance officers. And not only that, but borough presence in those areas, road service areas, those help out a lot, so presence. Any questions to that point?
These 312, oops. Ms. Bovee?
Yeah, I'm just curious, this use of CAP funds for community council cleanup.
It's a recommendation possibility.
Okay, we're not currently doing that.
No,
That's just a thought. Okay.
These 312 active cases, describe them, what are they?
Those are purely 8.50 code violations for trash and junk within
Trash and junk, like cars and just
cars,
whatever.
Just trash thrown on the ground within view of the public right of way.
Okay, thanks.
Flood damage prevention. So this is actually a good news story. Since the core area of the borough is a confluence of multiple rivers, flood damage is always a concern. We've made really good leaps in the flood damage prevention. We have identified 93 17.29 code violations, which is flood damage, building in a flood zone, those types of things. Our flood damage prevention manager, Ms. Tawny Boothby, is hard at work over the last couple of years, and a lot of her programs have seen some significant returns. So we just completed the FEMA hazard mitigation grant program that allowed the borough to purchase properties that were in the flood zones of the Matanuska River. A total of 15 homes were purchased, properties were purchased with this $4 million grant program. And I've got a picture of a couple of them on the next slide. So, additionally, we received a $2.5 million grant from the state of Alaska. Was the river management grant, and that allowed us to pay for a lot of things that were not included in the FEMA restrictions on their grants. They don't let you do demolition, they don't let you do studies and things like that. So this extra grant from the state helped us do a lot of the other stuff that was left over. And finally, February 26th this year, about 2 weeks ago, the hazard mitigation, the Mat-Su Borough Hazard Mitigation Plan was approved. That provides the jurisdiction eligibility to apply for the Robert T. Stafford Federal Disaster Relief and Emergency Act grant projects, and that takes us through 2026. So we're eligible for grants, for similar grants up until that date. So it was a big, and Tawny Boothby shepherded that effort for the last couple of years. So it's a long time coming that we see some returns there. So here's a couple before and afters. The properties on the Matanuska River, those were on the left, obviously the before, and that's what that property looks like after. So it's kind of returned to nature, saving the right of way, gave the property owners money for their property that was probably not going to be market value if they try to sell it themselves. So it's a bit win-win. Driveways. So driveways present a unique challenge for development services. We're very happy that the property owners are submitting their permits, complying with code. This only makes the borough roads last longer if we get the right drainage off them. But it does create a big backlog for us. We have over 6,000 permits that are still open right now. And by open, I mean either the residents are waiting for my inspectors to go there, or my inspectors are waiting for the residents to report completion so they can get a final inspection. So it's an open case. And we have over 6,000 of those right now. So I've broken down the driveway problem, and it's kind of a beast of a problem with that many cases open into RSAs. And it was just a simple way to break it down and find out where a lot of these driveway permits, these outstanding ones, are existing. So it's no surprise that the top 6 RSAs are also where the growth is in the borough. And we've heard the last 2 briefers talk about growth in the borough. These kind of depict it, and I have a slide on the next slide that kind of lays it out for you a little better. So we've analyzed the data starting this season. We're going to devote a large portion of our rights-of-way inspectors' time towards these 6 RSAs to try to chew down some of this data, this backlog that we have. If we target those 6 RSAs that compile about 72% of the backlog, we're going to see a pretty significant dent in it. The graph on the left shows the permits we received in 2020, which was about 2,900 permits in the year of 2020. Portion of that year was during the free period, where there was a lot of permits prior to the 2011. So that number's a little inflated. But as you can see in RSA 20 or RSA 17 on the right-hand graph, we have more outstanding cases than we do completed. And you know, my commitment is we're gonna fix that this year. We should never have more outstanding cases than we have completed. So there's a big gap there. Any questions on this slide? I know there's a lot of data on this slide.
Mr. Sumner?
Yeah, so on the application, it has a expected completion date. Do you still wait on the applicant informing you that it's complete, or do you just go out and inspect on or around the expected completion date?
We do wait for them to come back to us. However, if our inspector's in that area and we can see, and a lot of the times the property owners are out there doing the work already, there's an interchange that we can get the information back. So, but the problem is if they stop in September, October, we don't see them again until April. So. All right. Moving on. So here's what 6,600 driveway outstanding permits looks like. The colored areas are the RSAs. So you can see the growth areas that Ms. Castro was referencing. The northern or the core areas and the Connect area are the heavy growth area for home owners. They're also the heavy areas for driveways. So where do we go from here? Couple things. So you've heard me talk about the data and how we're going to use it to make smart resource decisions. And by smart resource decisions, I'm talking about our code compliance officers, our right-of-way inspectors, their time, and that's a lot of driving if we don't do it properly. We have the data now in the database that we can see the preponderance of cases. So if I keep my inspectors in a certain area for a longer period of time and not have to drive from Big Lake to Talkeetna, I'm saving all that time in an area, and I can chew down this database quite a bit. So that's what we're talking about when we say smart resource allocation. So there's other things that we can do with the data. And this matrix is kind of a future look, if you will. If you start in the lower left quadrant and expand outward, you can see some of the things that having good data allows us to do, from increased GIS applications to electronic permitting to processing public information requests at a much faster rate. We don't have to dig in boxes of paper. It's a great asset. So we're moving from a more complaint-driven process to a systematic data-driven process where we can predict kind of where the growth is. We can educate the public on driveways and permits and encroachments and things like that ahead of time. And that's where we're trying to get ahead of use the data to get ahead of the problem. Whether it's a need for public knowledge or of the process or establishing those relationships. So this is kind of our nirvana slide. So what does success look like for development services? So it comes in the form of stabilizing property conditions, fighting neighborhood declines, encouraging responsible growth, providing efficient permitting services, and usher in that image of Valley Beautiful that we're looking for. So that concludes my brief, and I can take any questions you have.
Questions? Mr. Sumner?
So of the, I think you said 6,000 outstanding permits, do you know how many of those are the newer permits with the deposits? And then I guess another question would be, so if somebody calls the borough and says, hey, my driveway's done, can you come out and inspect it? You were saying first in, first out. So the folks that have the new application with the deposit, what kind of a wait do you anticipate for somebody that calls in and asks for the inspection?
Sure. So this year, we're going to try and hire 2 more right-of-way inspectors. In the past, it's averaged about 1.5 a year, inspectors a year, and we weren't using the data to drive them in where it was a first in, first out. So I'm going from, Kinnick area to Talkeetna because this is the first one in. That's not efficient at all. So we're adding right-of-way inspectors. This is the first, throwing manpower at it, and we're using the data to kind of tell us where to go and use it efficiently. The plan right now is to chew down both piles, basically. So we have the existing stuff. We know who the existing ones are just by the date it was submitted, and we know who the new ones are. The great thing about it is most of those are in the same area because the growth has been pretty much isolated in those areas already. So to answer your question, we're getting to both of them. We're going to tackle both of them at the same time. One thing I'm going to be looking at as the manager is making sure we don't miss something and miss that person that is ready and says they're ready, and we don't get to them for the whole season. That's not going to happen. So.
And then have we reached the point now where we're processing and completing more than are being applied for, or are we not there yet?
Yes. So that's the one big hurdle that the development services had was with the free period. We added about 3,600 driveway permits to our database. So, and the hard thing about those is we're all pre-2011 driveways, so they're already there. It's a matter of getting back to and inspecting those. And my guess is more than half of those are going to be good to go, and it's going to be a simple 10-minute inspection, and we can knock those out pretty quick. So.
And then I'm sorry, I had another question that wasn't related to driveways, but I applied for my business license renewal, and I noticed I think they issued me a new business license, and then they issued me a notice of my other business license being canceled. So like they issued me, same company, they issued me a new number. Is that typical, or?
I'm business license section. I can take that as a note, and we can get you an answer though.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just maybe something to look into. But
yeah. Business so one of those codes on second slide was 3.36 was business licenses. So it's in our realm of we're looking at how to handle those. The problem is a lot of those come from the state that we have so many business license agencies that creates a problem. The database problems don't line up. So.
Okay, we lost two planning commissioners on the line, so we're gonna let the clerks try to get them back real quick, and then we'll take a brief.
Eddie's doesn't mean you have to go off record.
Okay. I want you to know too, I got my kennel license renewal in today. I worked on it 3 hours. I saw this in the agenda. I got so worried you guys had cuffed me when I came here, so it's in the mail. You got to list every dog, every rabies shot. It took a while, but I'm very happy I got it in. It's only a couple months late, don't worry.
Welcome to the Synexus Conference Manager. Please enter your conference ID followed by the pound. Joining conference.
Okay. Ms. Nowers, you're next up.
I had a question on that Nirvana slide. The plan is to move permitting to e-commerce. It's a start. Do you expect to be able to complete that this year? And what would be like some of the permits that are, you can't do now? Like some of the key ones, the big ones that people use that you're trying to get online.
So the only one that is online for is the driveway. And it's a submission form. It's not an interactive, you can track your permit per se. This year, I don't think we're going to get to any more online. But we have to start building the framework and build the case to get the money, to get the software. That's what we're going to do this year.
Yeah.
Past 2021-ish, I would love to have that permitting online, just like the business licenses are. I can go online and get my business license anytime I want. I should be able to go back and get my permits and see all of the documents that I had on there. To answer your question of stuff that can't go on there, then we start getting into code compliance cases, which it's a Privacy Act and HIPAAs and all the legal stuff that we can't put on there for public access.
So driveway permit would be the kind of biggest thing.
It's a big
you're
one.
working on.
Encroachments and driveways are kind of.
Okay. And then on the flood damage prevention, when you say violations, the 93 active cases that are violations, does that mean that those are built in a floodplain
Yes,
and they're not supposed to be there?
they're not supposed to be there.
And then can we do anything about, like we have identified floodplains now, can we keep people from building in them?
Yeah, can we keep people from building in them? If we know about it. That's the trick is knowing about it ahead of time and informing people. It affects their insurance. It affects all kinds of stuff. And if we inform them of that kind of things, it may make their decision a lot better if they can't get a bank loan or insurance on their property.
So we can encourage them.
We can encourage, there you go.
Okay. And then if we have borough property and it's in a floodplain, we don't plat that and put subdivisions in there anymore.
We try not to. I'm new, but that makes sense to me.
Okay. That sounds like a good idea. I like Valley Beautiful, by the way. Coin that phrase. Thank you.
Yeah, on the prioritization and timeline standards, category 2, you've got those target resolution within 20 business days. Do most people respond to the warning letter ticket? I have a lot of cases in my district. I know we're on Willow time. It's a little different speed, but I can't imagine 20 days is near enough to resolve most of those.
So it's a target. If I would have put 180 days up there, it probably would have been the wrong target also. So we need to play with the target number. I'm more focused on the initial response times. If I can get those down, I think the targets will come down, because if I get the initial response down, we started the discussion with the property owners, and it's a little bit more easy to resolve stuff. So I think one is tied to the other. So.
Anything else?
Mayor, if I could get back to Assemblyman Sumner's on
Okay.
the business license.
Please do.
Just so I'm clear, we don't issue the business licenses in planning. That's a business license section. But I will try to figure out I will get the question down to them.
No, I was just mentioning it because I don't know if maybe you guys, if possibly you did that with a lot of licenses, then, I mean, a lot of people might think that their license was canceled but you issued one under a different number or something. But
I'll carry the question.
sorry,
down.
I didn't know you guys didn't handle that. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for Mr. Majors? Okay, great report. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Manager, anything else? Mr. Strawn, I guess this is your meeting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a couple of things. One thing is that it was part of the Matanuska River buyout program. We did purchase the old Fireside building that you'll see is just as you're driving across the river, the Matanuska River out towards the Butte on your right-hand side. It's a building that's been there for a while. I remember eating there when it was a restaurant when I was a child. It wasn't open for very long, but that building is going to be demolished this summer, and it's just going to be vacant land right there. So as you drive by it, enjoy it while it lasts because it's going away.
Aren't you going to move it someplace?
I think it's going to be, my understanding is it's going to be, at least on a limited version, be used for some fire training. Like maybe they'll cut some holes in the roof and things like that, but then they're just going to wipe it out. Yep, that's part of the grant program, is that it has to be torn down, is my understanding. So it was interesting to hear 1,100 residential connects per year is the average, considering we get about 600 driveway permits per year. So we've got a little bit lacking there, other than when we did them when they were free and we received a couple of thousand within just in a couple of months. So that definitely, so that 6,000 outstanding driveways, when you think about it, a couple of years ago, I came out here and said we had 8,000. I can say that the vast majority of those, they are not waiting on us. We are waiting on them, but we are, over the past 2-3 years, we have definitely been keeping up with the current ones as well as chipping away at the old ones. And I think with some of Mr. Major's
So what
changes,
closes out a driveway permit?
that's when our right-of-way inspector goes out there and sees that it is built according to our standards, and they're good to go. And then once that's done, we give them back their $150 deposit and give them a driveway permit, and they go about their merry way. One of the changes that we made that this board adopted is when we adopted the new driveway standards. We said if the borough built it, you're automatically permitted. So that's going to take that was a couple of years ago when we found a driveway that wasn't built to our standards, and we gave them a letter saying that you need to redo your driveway, and they said, well, you guys just built it not too long ago, right? So we worked with our public works department to make sure that they're building them all to our standards, and they've definitely come around on that and are doing that. But it doesn't make sense for us to say, now you have to get a driveway permit after we built your driveway. So that's going to save a lot of permitting for people as we do road projects. There's going to be driveway permits on those. And then, yeah, that's all I have for you today.
Thank you. Ms. Nowers, please.
Just had a question, just thinking ahead to our next agenda, it just kills me to see like situations like Bogart Ingstrom, where we know we've got a bad problem and we're still 3 years out from trying to get some resolution to it, and how we try to get ahead of some of these planning things, whether it's keeping people from building in a floodplain or predicting the traffic. I just wonder if and maybe some of the other commissioners and assembly members could chime in for our next agenda, if we could get some kind of information that shows a growth in this area. I mean, I think the heat map is great because you can see what's happening on the FISHHOOKs. And, how could we get ahead of that? Because it's cheaper to do it ahead of time than it is to try to come after the fact. If we can do just things that kind of show us, it seems like we can at least try to predict where the growth is going to happen. And I know some efforts have been done, but visualizing that for the assembly with the GIS department with some overlays. And I'd really like to see that on our next agenda with some discussion of, are there ways we can try to get our heads above water a little bit?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, through to Assemblymember Nowers, to the mayor. One of the things that's coming before you within the next 6 months is our official streets and highways plan. We have a draft of it. And what you'll see with that is as part of that, they've definitely taken the growth patterns into consideration as they come up with our future road corridors. And they did sort of a high-level intersection analysis. And they've identified some areas where we have intersections that are sort of that left-right offset issue that don't necessarily have to be like that. And it does identify some of the fixes that we can do now before it's a problem, because there's not a whole lot of traffic, and at least get it on our radar that at some point we need to align these up so that we don't run into problems like that in the future. So that will be hopefully a step in the right direction there.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Strawn. Appreciate that. On the road, like the last assembly meeting, we were looking at the capital projects, pages and pages and pages that come in. What can be done to kind of pare that down or make it a little bit? Does that go through the planning division? I guess Mr. Brown could jump in too. And
so are you referring to the capital improvement program?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is, I mean, the purpose of that document is so that we can have a list of projects that the borough sort of says, yeah, these are important, and different groups can go after funding for that.
Right.
So we have the other capital projects which are actually prioritized and tied to funding and things like that. But that particular document is really
a wish list.
It's a wish list. It's a non-prioritized wish list that allows an organization to go to different organizations to look for funding and say, look, this is on a list that the government has said is important, and they can pursue that. So I think we could limit it, but I don't know if there's a whole lot of benefit to make it a smaller list.
Or set standards or
it used to be this really gargantuan thing. It's gotten a lot better. But I mean, I'm open if we want to adjust how that's done. I'm open to coming up with a new process. We are bound somewhat by code, by how we do it right now. But if we need to relook at that, we certainly can.
Well, I don't know what the assembly members and planning commissioners think, but it seems like it's quite large and quite cumbersome at some point in time, and to the point where you don't even really know if it applies anymore realistically. So I don't know if you want to take a look at it and bring something back to the assembly. And
right. So that's why we've asked that the projects be renominated every year, because it used to be that they just would carry over and carry over, and some of the projects didn't mean anything to anybody anymore. So now at least it requires somebody to nominate them on every 2 years at least.
But virtually anyone can nominate. Is that the correct understanding?
Well, I don't know the level of detail there. I think different organizations can nominate. Yeah. I don't know if a private person can, or if there's criteria there. I'd have to look into that.
All right. Well, I guess sometime we should take a little bit of a look at that and maybe put it in staff notes. And
I will definitely have staff look at the process and see if there's improvements that can be made there. Make it a more
otherwise,
reasonable
Mrs. Strawn, this was a great meeting. The topics were excellent today, and thank you.
All right.
Okay, we'll go to comments. So I'll turn this over to Madam Chair of the Planning Commission to do the commissioners first.
Commissioner Masanin, are you still on the phone? Is he checked out? Okay, Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Jim for his presentation, and MEA for their presentation, Planning Commission. I always learned a lot from these meetings, and kind of echoing what Assembly Member Nowers mentioned about being proactive instead of reactive on our stuff. I think that's a great approach, and I always do appreciate a lot of the technology, especially what Mr. Strawn has done for us and some of the GIS mapping stuff. And I think that heat map, or the heat, as I always call a heat mapping idea, I think that's really good. That's all that stuff gives a great visual, and I think the public appreciates that stuff as well. And thank you to the Assembly for hosting the joint meeting today.
Commissioner Elder.
Yes, I too thank you for hosting this meeting, and it's my pleasure to be here. I did receive a couple of texts during the meeting from Commissioner Masanin, and he has been listening all this meeting. So I think the transmission has been coming and going, and he feels that he was muted also. So just kind of a heads up. But I appreciate the presentations; they are wonderful.
Commissioner Chesbro.
I would echo my fellow commissioners thanking everybody for this. This is very informative. And I agree that we need to try to let people know before they make mistakes on floodplains or whatever. And I think that's hard to do. But I think if we can come up with some kind of way to make sure people aren't buying property that they're thinking they're going to build something on and it's in a bad place, it'd be really helpful to them too. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you always for these. It's a good opportunity for us to get together and sort of talk about some things that are pressing. I did want to make one comment with the MEA that I really appreciated, was that they consulted with the community councils in the area, of which apparently there were 3, and they really included them, and that has been a big push for us, that we include community councils in areas where things are going to be coming in to either negatively or positively affect them. And that then brings me to, where are we with our community councils and updating them, especially the ones that haven't been updated in 20 some years, because they're supposed to be updated every 5. That's something I'd like to really see pushed ahead. And I think today was a really great example of why it's important to maintain updated and current community council things. So, and with that, I don't know if Mr. Masanin is on the line and able to say anything. I would welcome him if he did. Otherwise, thank you. I always appreciate these. I only have one more. Not that I'm counting down my meetings, but with that, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Spropoulos, any comments or?
I just encourage Mr. Sumner to repay for his business fee when he reapplies.
Okay. Mr. Brown, comments? Okay. Mr. Sumner, comments?
I did pay.
You can address the attorney directly if you want.
I guess I have 2 business licenses now, a new one and an expired one. But no, I would like to mention though on the construction in the flood zones, that's really not a typical thing you'd see much anymore, because you're never going to be able to get financing without buying flood insurance. It's quite expensive. So, and the borough also has permitting requirements. So I really don't think that that's going forward should be a huge issue. I think most of those that we ended up buying were quite old and probably had never had financing. But
Ms. Nowers?
Thank you. I just heard Assemblymember Sumner went out of business, bankrupt, and then you got a new business. Is that what you? No, I just really appreciated the meeting. I'm not completely sure that we do as much as we can to help people not build in spots. I hope that's the case with the floodplain, because it's been really expensive. It's a really expensive process to buy those properties back. And a lot of those property owners felt like they never got notified, even though there were requirements that the realtor notify them. So yeah, I'd really appreciate any discussion to try to get ahead of the game, and really appreciate the meetings and the information from MEA and from staff. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Koo, excuse me.
I think CIP list is enormous. I'm working on a matrix system to help with that CIP list for RSA borough roads. I'll keep you informed. Besides that, I enjoyed the meeting.
Mr. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank our guests from DOT and MEA and the planning commissioners and our staff for always being prepared.
Ms. Bovee?
Yeah, I just want to say that building in a floodplain is still a real thing up north. These aren't financed homes, but people who got a deal on some riverfront property can build a house on a weekend. I do want to thank Director Strawn for organizing tonight's meeting, DOT and MEA for their presentations, and welcome to the borough, Mr. Majors.
Yes, obviously, first of all, I just want to thank the borough staff who's been working with DOT for many years now. And you get to see by the list that they have of the projects going on this summer and what went on last summer, all that coordination with the borough and the DOT is paying off, so I'm pretty proud of that. Mr. Hayes, I think you were the longest working person here on that, so thank you very much. And Mr. Brown, I think keeping that up with DOT pays a lot of dividends to us, and hopefully we'll be able to do something with our road bond projects too this summer. So yes, thank you, MEA, for coming, Mr. Jenkins, Ms. Castro, and you two gentlemen for coming tonight and presenting. It's always nice to have a partnership with MEA and the Mat-Su Borough, so we appreciate it. And I look forward to my power not going out this winter. And so, but thank you very much. And Mr. Strawn, I really appreciate it. Mr. Majors, thank you for the great report tonight. And I do have 2 of my 3 licenses. 2 are good, by the way. I just wanted to let you know that I'm pretty good. I did rush to get the other one in today. But anyway, thanks. And I do have an outstanding driveway permit, so I guess I'll have to make sure I get that finished. I got it in August or September, and so it's snowed over now, so I'll get it finished, and I'm looking forward to getting it in and inspected. So, Mr. Strawn, as usual, you do a great job, great service to the Mat-Su Borough. We appreciate it. And so with that, I'll just end. Commissioners, thank you very much for coming and attending. I know the COVID vaccines, it's my understanding through the state, anybody can get a shot now. Is that 16 and older? So I think that covers most of us here. And so go get your shots, and let's get back to full business. And so with that, we will adjourn this meeting. I guess I have one more planning commission meeting, I guess, in the fall. I'll be looking forward to that. And I really enjoyed this agenda tonight and very thorough. So appreciate that. So we'll adjourn at, what do you, Madam Clerk, 7:23 p.m.
You will now be disconnected.